Hey, Steve Sarkisian, founder and CEO of Oklahoma Eye Surgeons. I got that right? Oklahoma Eye Surgeon.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate the invitation. It's been about 15 years or something since I've been on. I'm
Yeah,
glad to be on again. I thank you for the invitation to talk.
yeah, it's great having you. And also, it's sort of a relaunch of the show. It's been a year and a half or so since my last episode. I got carried away with a amateur singing career, and so
Wow.
I've always been a rock star wannabe. So that's where the past year and a half have gone.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm jealous. I always had these visions of my children learning how all to play like we could easily have a good because I have we have four children, and a couple of them are somewhat musical, but the thought of having a family rock band is it'll never happen, but it's a
rock
fun
on, man.
it's a fun delusion. I actually would that was one of the priorities. I wanted my children to have a firm understanding of rock music. And
Yeah,
so every weekend I would be sitting after getting back from the gym, I'd sit in the hot tub and all the kids would be out there. I just would teach them about different eras of rock music, and it's like, okay, this is punk and this is new wave and this is ska and this is, and man, they ate it up. They really enjoyed it.
yeah. Now
Amazingly.
let's teach some people about
Now let's teach
glaucoma.
people some procedural pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Teach them about
So
that.
what have you been involved with?
So
Like the iDose is the latest,
I've been
greatest, next
involved
big
in
thing.
clinical trials with the iDose, the travaprost sustained release, and the and the bimataprost sustained release, the Durysta.
Right.
So there were several Durysta studies that I was involved with, probably actually about three or four of them. And then the original iDose TR study, the phase 2, and then the phase 3 studies that allowed us to get FDA approval. I was the largest recruiter in the phase 3 study. So I was the
Awesome.
first author on several of those papers that allowed the pivotal data that got us FDA approval, just talking about both safety and efficacy.
Right.
And then, of course, the story goes on. The next generation of iDose implants are being studied, and I'm part of that. And even combining iDose with other things, and iDose and cataract surgery, and these are all things that are being looked at. But also,
And there are different delivery methods, right? Because one type is injecting like basically a piece of Vicryl, and
so
the other is into the
the
into the
Durysta
TM.
is injecting a dissolvable matrix that gets injected into the FDA approval technique was in the anterior chamber.
Right.
And a lot of us have shifted to injecting it in the sulcus if the patient is pseudophakic, just for the sake of endothelial protection.
Right.
And I think interestingly, when the iDose came out and there was a gap in coverage, like a lot of people increased their volume of Durysta because they were like, okay, now when this wears off in 6 to 12 months, hopefully that we'll get reimbursement for iDose. It's now been almost February of 2024. We had the first commercially available iDoses, and I was among the first to implant them on Valentine's Day, and we now have pretty good coverage for pretty much most of the MACs, and but even a lot of the Medicare Advantage plans are starting to pay for it. Now we still have to fight. I have the dubious distinction of being the first surgeon to submit an iDose to Medicare for reimbursement. And now the iDose differing from the Durysta being in it can be done anywhere. It can be done in the ASC or it can be done in the
Right.
office. I think 99% of everyone does them in the office just for expediency. And invariably, the patient says the following words after a Durysta is implanted: "Is that it?" That's usually what they say. They say, "Is that it?" Especially those who've had retinal injections because
Yeah.
they're freaked out by the thought of that. So yeah, they say, "Is that it?" because it's really, especially once you get in the zone with doing it, it's such a benign procedure.
And also, unlike retina injections, you're not coming back every month or so for ever.
Right. That if they had figured out the sulcus injection thing sooner, they probably would have gotten their FDA approval, their FDA
Right.
indication for repeat injection. Of course, big news this year, iDose got FDA approval for, so big deal. It's a super big deal, because even in the phase 2 study, we demonstrated that there's no cell loss because it's anchored. The iDose is anchored in the angle,
Right.
it just doesn't move.
Right. Whereas the
Um,
Durysta caused
it's
endothelial cell
yeah,
loss. And
it moves, and
yeah,
thus the sulcus technique, I think, has helped save it. But not everyone's doing that. And it's not totally straightforward to do that. But I think it's definitely still has its usefulness. And there's more things down the pike. I've also both, with both AbbVie and their development of things, and Glaukos, of course, and then SpyGlass has the IOL has the two containers, or that have the bimataprost in them, that passively go through those holders, and they get and it's designed to be an in the bag lens. And then the it's a great location, being in that IOL plane, to have the medicine being released there. And so that study that's being investigated.
how long is that supposed to last in terms of
Well,
the
we're finding out.
medication?
We're finding out. Right. I think the study will demonstrate that. I would gather. I don't have enough long-term follow-up to say, but I'm hoping that it's at least a couple of years, and who knows? It might be 3 or 4 years. We just don't know.
Yeah.
I think probably the company has an idea in that some of their in vivo studies, but you know they're not sharing that with
That's
they're
great.
doing things right.
What sort
Uh,
of lens? What sort of lens implant
it's
is
just it's
part of
just a
that?
acrylic lens,
So just a
you know.
monofocal one.
But I mean, I'm sure that they can either become an IOL company or partner with someone for
Right.
the whole IOL line.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's
so those are
awesome.
those are like, some of the more prominent things. I know there are many other. A lot of people are trying to get into this space, uh, and it's really fascinating to see what's happening. But you know, like the Durysta and the iDose TR, that's right here, right now, and that is radically changing the way we're doing things. But it's sad that there's still people in Medicare that just fundamentally doesn't understand what this is.
Yeah. How did your
Uh,
application go to get that person covered? Because isn't it really expensive?
it is, but if you look at what those retina implants are and how much those cost, it's certainly in line with that. And I think there's several retina implants that are almost 20 grand. So it's
This is what, 14 grand? Is that?
something like that. Yeah. Get, and but I'm I'm still doing Durysta, and there's some weeks where I'm in planning like 15 iDose. And so it's changed the way that we practice. And so there are powers that be that are trying to, in order to, I don't know if it's because of confusion, or if it's confusion or incompetence or a nefarious technique to ration healthcare, but they're trying to impose step therapy on this.
Right.
And
But would you still do SLT first in your patients, or do you
I
go right
think
to a
I think
injectable?
it depends. I'd say probably over 90% of the time, yes. SLT is my first line therapy. I think that we now, with the light study data, have good evidence that that's
Yeah. good
that's
long-term
appropriate.
ish and
So
cost
now
effective.
people that are still starting people on medicine, surgeons that are still starting medicine first, they don't really have a leg to stand on anymore. But for years, I'd be incensed when I'd see an article in the throwaways, and it seemed like it was a quarterly phenomenon where it would say, primary SLT, is it ready for prime time? And it's like, are we just recycling the same nonsense? Meanwhile,
I've been doing it primary for at least 15 years.
right,
Like I
yeah,
need
like
the
I've
light
been doing
trial
it
to know
probably
it
since
works.
2006, and it's because it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me that, but now we're there now. And I think that most people are understanding, and then the people are discovering SLT, like they're discovering a long lost friend that all of a sudden general ophthalmologists that are buying SLTs just, because they finally get it. It's a fascinating and wonderful thing because I do a lot of standalone iDose. I do a lot of iDose TR combined with MIGS and with or without phaco. So some of the surgeries I'm doing the most frequently without just standalone glaucoma surgeries are iStent Infinite iDose, Omni iDose, and AlloFlo iDose, AlloFlo Uveo, which is the creating a superciliary cleft and then placing to keep the cleft open, donor sclera, and combining the iDose with that, I think helps blunt any pressure spikes that may happen as some of that the posterior sclera that you create with your visco dissection starts to close and the patient starts to reach equilibrium. I mean, that's another thing we've learned is it's really smart to keep people on meds, and especially things that enhance the uveoscleral outflow. So it's almost like the iDose and the AlloFlo Uveo are match made in heaven. But
Yeah,
I
but I was
usually
wondering
always
why you
attack.
would combine them because I could see it. Let's say if you're doing a MIGS procedure and patient's already on 3 meds, you may not get enough out of the MIGS alone.
That's exactly right.
So, yeah.
And that's my logic with combining the Infinite with the iDose is that I was first author on the pivotal data for the Infinite study. And like that data really surprised people because it showed that patients with an average pressure in the mid-20s on 3 or 4 medicines who have failed a trab and a tube and cyclophotocoagulation could end up with pressures in the mid-teens just with an iStent Infinite. So the thought that you've bypassed the trabecular meshwork with a trabeculectomy is nonsense, because once the trabeculectomy the bleb is stable, the TM wakes up somewhere in the first month or two. You bypass it, and yeah, it might not be working that well, but it does wake up. And and then I think there's something about the iStent that allows you to spread them out so much, where you can get plus degrees of outflow if you're really making the effort to make sure that each one is 2 to 3 clock hours away from the next, and you're targeting a little area of pigment or a little area of RBCs in the canal to maximize where you're putting them where the collector channels are. It is really astonishing the types of results that you can get. And if you don't believe it, just look at the data. Like the data demonstrates that. So you get that level. So I am a strong believer in accessing the TM first, like TM first. But but let's be real. Like people say, well, they're not going to have as low as the pressure as if they were a trab. Well, maybe not. Probably not. These people are refractory already. But
Right.
if you add an iDose to the mix, we can then start to get those low teens pressures. And it has been it's like the sustained release pharmaceuticals has helped make the MIGS dream evolve to its full manifestation of efficacy. And the dream, of course, obviously, is to have people have a target pressure on as few meds as possible, or no meds. And for the first time ever since the advent of MIGS, we now have that. And so I think that's why we've shifted from talking about MIGS to talking about interventional glaucoma, because we now have something that lasts 3 to 4 years, that can be repeated. We have approval for it to be repeated, and
can be done in office.
And it can be done in the office. I think and that's something we're working on, is trying to figure out if you have an office-based surgery suite that is accredited and certified, which I do. That's where I do all my iDoses and clinical trials, are in my office-based surgery suite, and it's fantastic. The patient really doesn't need more than a Valium to have an iDose. But the problem is then it's really the practice deal, the dealing with the practice's revenue cycle and cost of goods sold, and you start to put all that stuff on your payables start to increase, and then that's really how it becomes a glaucoma practice, becomes like a rental practice, is where you're carrying all these high dollar things that have to be, and then you have to like have some security, and because here you have a bunch of things in your office that are worth what they're worth.
Botox.
And no, exactly. It's changing the way everything is happening. And there are still some people that they're just not understanding it. They'll get upset when the few older general ophthalmologists in town are not doing anything on patients that have glaucoma, on several meds, have some visual field loss, and they're still doing phaco alone on these people. And it really, I've retrained, my colleagues have retrained most of them, but it's indefensible at this point.
Yeah.
Someone's glaucoma gets worse because you did cataract surgery and it didn't address their glaucoma at the same time. God help you, because you really, you missed the boat. And so you've put that patient at risk. Just being able to add that next level of protection and IOP lowering is really, it's been amazing. And like I said, it's changed my practice. Who's a candidate for the iDose? And open angle glaucoma that needs pressure to be lowered.
Yeah.
Phakic. If they have open angle glaucoma and they need to have a lower pressure, they're a candidate for procedural pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And
really helps that compliance issue of, are they taking their drops?
Everyone over 80 is getting procedural pharmaceuticals, and the look on their face, because they know that octogenarians are not a self-righteous group. They're not like, I do everything perfectly all the time. No, they have developed the humility to acknowledge that they don't, and they have this overwhelming sense of relief. And their children, who are often in the office with them, they're like, this is great. Yes, please. I have had children and grandchildren say that they live near their grandparents and they go over there just to put their drops in at night. And it's setting people free from unnecessary burdens.
Yeah. And
in addition,
some patients where the family member can only come once a day or a couple of times a week. And so they just can't help them.
Absolutely. And another amazing thing that we've noticed when we really look at the data is that the IOP is on average almost 2 millimeters of mercury lower with the travaprost sustained release implant than with travaprost as an eye drop. And it's not clear to me if that's part of that is compliance, but these are people that were in the clinical trial. So it's unclear to me if part of this was compliance, part of this was or if it's just the simple fact that the efficacy of a prostaglandin when it's inside the eye is just that much better. I think it's probably more the latter because, I mean, if you think about what these
What it takes to
chemicals
get a
have
meds from the surface of the eye into the eye to where it
right.
needs to go.
If you think
Yeah.
about the mechanics of that and the pharmacodynamics of topical medications, and you compare it with putting the medication right next to the end organ that you're trying to treat, oh, okay, this makes sense. And the people love getting off their eye drops. I think that most of us are just delusional and think that all our patients are so wonderful and do everything we say. And not my patients, they do everything I tell them. And people need to get over themselves. And I know this because I always see people that I see as new patients that are pseudofaking and they refer to me for glaucoma. I'm like, oh, who did your cataract surgery? 9 times out of 10, they don't remember.
Yeah.
We're not really all that important. We are. But it's not about, we're not kingdom building here. We're just trying to, save one eye at a time. And until someone else takes over for us.
And this will get us there. That's great. One last question with the iDose. Now that you said it's repeatable, proof to be repeated, is that re-injecting the medicine in the iDose or is it a second iDose?
So what that is, and we actually did exchange studies where, we would put in a second iDose and then use the inserter for the iDose to grab the old iDose and remove it. But you have to switch them out. Interestingly, at 3 years when those devices were opened, and they weren't all exactly 3 years, but they have studied it, looking at iDoses after 3 years, there was still 16% of the travaprost oil in the device, which is fascinating. So I have some patients that were in the iDose study that had implants done 8-9 years ago that still have some effect. It's really fascinating to see. So I think also this is theoretical, I think, but there have been some studies that demonstrate a permanent alteration of the uvascleral outflow with prostaglandin use. And so having it inside the eye, you can imagine would enhance that all the more.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we shouldn't do this just once every 15 years or so.
Yeah, man, I'd be happy
to
be as often as you'd like to have me, man. It'd be I could be Matt Damon to your Jimmy Kimmel if you'd. And
sorry, we're out of time for Steve Sarkisian. Apologies.
Oh man.
Yeah, cool.
There was a rivalry there, if you don't know. It was.
Yeah.
They were frenemies.